Hi, and welcome. I want to begin this episode, as I always do, by acknowledging that the land that I am on is Aboriginal land. It always was, and it always will be. And a few days ago, I was chatting with a beautiful woman, Kirsten, who is part of the Eve community, and she was telling me that it is the 25th anniversary of the beginning of the fight against the Jabiluka mine. And I remember that happening when I was in my early 20s. There was quite a lot of attention on the resistance against this mine, and some big kind of celebrities, big bands from around the world like U2 and were really lending their voice to support. But this movement and this resistance was driven by the traditional owners of the land there, the Mirarr. The Mirarr are the traditional owners of the northern parts of northern Australia, so parts of Kakadu National Park. And it was an amazing effort in resistance and fighting against this mine going ahead that was ultimately successful. And so today I particularly want to pay my respect to the Mirarr and their incredible efforts in that landmark historical fight that they ultimately won. And I would encourage you to look into it over the last few days. Since Kirsten brought it to my attention, I have gone back and watched a few documentaries about it, and just an incredible effort, and also just lots to learn in just kind of seeing how it played out, seeing the way that the government engaged with traditional owners, the kind of gaslighting of the government of traditional owners of the land, and just relentless pressure. And so it was just an amazing effort by the Mirarr to hold firm and to keep on fighting and to rally support and ultimately to have stopped that mine from going ahead. So check it out. If you even just Google, I'm sure that you'll see there's a bunch of different articles and documentaries that you can see. I think the first one that I watched, which was great, was A Fight for Country. So have a look at that. It's on YouTube. Okay, so last episode I told you, I think I recorded it just before I went off to Nepal. And I was very excited about that. And now I am back. I've been back for a couple of weeks. And I had a really amazing time. It was so beautiful, so lovely to go back there after 24 years. And amazing in lots of ways how much it hadn't changed to my eye. Lots of things felt really, really the same. And then, of course, some things did feel like, they've really developed, or some areas, heaps more buildings in them, and obviously seeing people with mobile phones and things like that, which was not the case 24 years ago. But so beautiful to be back there, and beautiful to go trekking in the Himalayas. And it also was not exactly what I was hoping for, in the sense that I got sick for most of the time that we were trekking, with a weird kind of sickness that started with vomiting and diarrhea, and then just led to just being nauseous for 5 days, and just kind of big waves of nausea throughout. And had weird, my mouth felt like it was full of ulcers, but I didn't actually have any ulcers, but super sensitive and just totally exhausted, and all sorts of strange things. You probably don't need to know all the details. But so that definitely added another dimension to the experience, but it didn't ruin the experience. It just added another element. And, it's funny how that can be the case in life sometimes, can't it? We might have a particular way that we hope things will pan out, and sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's all bad. I would definitely say I would have rather not be sick, because it was not fun quite a bit of the time. But it didn't ruin the trip. And that happens in life too, doesn't it? Where hard things can sit right alongside beautiful things. And it's kind of the richness of the tapestry of life, I suppose. So while I was over there, I got to connect with a dear friend of mine, Gopal, who I had met there in 1999 when I was there. And we have stayed friends over the years, and we've stayed connected online, but also we've seen each other, visited each other. He was in Japan for a while. I visited him there, and then he's come over here to Australia. And anyway, so it was just so lovely to see him again. I met him when I was 21 and he was 17 years old. And so just amazing to kind of all these years later to still feel this beautiful connection with someone. And I remember back when I first met him, I just thought this guy has such a pure heart. There was something really kind of innocent about him. And although he's matured and grown and, had all this life experience since then, there's something that's still really beautiful about his nature. And it was so nice to spend that time with him. And really beautifully, we both, since we met, have in our different ways found our way to the practice of yoga. And that was really lovely to connect on as well. And he just had this really sort of beautiful sense of ease and peace about him. He runs a couple of businesses. It was really lovely to connect with other people who knew him and to hear them speak about him in terms of his role as a businessman in the community. And just to hear how much people really respected him, that he's a good guy and that he treats his staff really well and he treats clients really well and all of this. And anyway, there's something really lovely about him. And so one night we went for a big walk and then we sat down and had a cuppa and I asked him, I said, well, Gopal, what do you think is the secret to happiness? And he was telling me that, so he had grown up in Nepal, and then after we met, a few years after that, he moved to Japan and he studied international business. And he then eventually, like after 12 years of working in Japan, he came back to Pokhara in Nepal. And he was telling me how when he came back from Japan that he was really like driven, like, I'm going to be this big businessman in Nepal, in Pokhara. I'm going to be the best businessman. I'm going to be the most successful businessman, and was really kind of motivated to be successful and recognized as being successful. And then over time, he said that he one day had realized that he was regularly asking people, who are you? So he was talking to his clients and, business associates and things, and like, who are you? What do you do? And he realized that he had never actually asked himself, who am I? And he sat for a while with this question, who am I? And he said initially the answer that came to him was, I'm a businessman. And that felt really unsatisfying. And so he sat for days and months with this question of, well, who am I? That's deeper than that. Like, and looking for an answer that felt true in the sense that it felt real and satisfying, like an answer that he could kind of settle with and feel good about. And that process, I think, led him to then just consider his whole life and the balance of it, and realize that ultimately just pursuing being this kind of high rolling businessman was actually not gonna cut it for him. And that for him, happiness is about having enough of a goal that you are challenged and stimulated, but not so much of a goal that you actually are overwhelmed or unhappy, or that you don't have time for the things that make up a full and balanced life. So his sense of like, I am businessman, he said initially it was such a focal point for him that it was at the expense of everything else. And through this process of kind of considering who am I, he realized that he was way more than that and wanted to be more than that. And so, yeah, it was about going, okay, business goals are one part of my life, but if they are at the expense of other things that matter to me, then that's not okay. And for him, the secret to happiness was having just enough challenge that you were stimulated and excited and driven to get up and do something, and you had that sense of getting somewhere, progressing with something, but not so much that it stopped you from being able to, spend time with family and friends and enjoy nature and have time alone and all of those kinds of things. And he listed off other things in his life that mattered to him, that he felt like if he didn't have those in the mix of his life, that wasn't a successful life. So it got me thinking. I felt like it was a really beautiful answer and it really rang true for me. And I guess it brings me to a question that we can consider together. And it might be an unpopular opinion or an unpopular suggestion, but I think it's refreshing to consider, might your goals actually be too big? Could it be that you are putting pressure on yourself to dream a particular dream or to hold and work towards a particular goal that is actually not enhancing your life? I think that we can have a lot of pressure to have big dreams and big goals. You've probably heard the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal, and that we're all meant to have one of those. That's kind of our real driving motivation, our driving force. And even I was thinking about that term where people say, if your dream doesn't scare you, then you're not dreaming big enough. Have you heard that? If your dream doesn't scare you, then you're not dreaming big enough. And I feel like if I say that in the right voice, in like a motivational speaker's kind of voice, you could be like, yes, that's so motivating. If it doesn't scare you, dream bigger. But actually, as I was thinking about it recently, I'm like, that's kind of weird, isn't it? Like, if it doesn't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough. Like, really? And now I have had some really big dreams and really big goals, and I still have some. And they're absolutely okay. And sometimes it's even okay to have those and to kind of put your head down and just work hard at the expense of other things to make some progress towards achieving those goals. So I'm not saying that having the BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal, or to like dream so big that maybe it scares you, it's not inherently wrong, but it's also not inherently right or necessary. And I think that conversation with Gopal just kind of got me reflecting on how do we assess whether our goals are right. We often think about, okay, like how do we achieve our goals or how do we set goals and all of that kind of thing. But what about like assessing our goals themselves? Like, are they good goals for us? And so it's worth us remembering that not everybody feels happy when they achieve their goals. Most people will not feel enduring happiness or satisfaction through achieving a particular goal. So it might be satisfying in the short term, but there's a thing called hedonic adaptation, which is that basically we might do a particular thing that boosts our happiness for an amount of time, but ultimately we kind of go back to our what is considered to be our set point of happiness. So if that's the case, that reaching that massive goal, that big dream that you have, ultimately probably won't make you that much happier in the long term, it's worth thinking about, well, is it enhancing my life in the meantime? Like in the process of having the goal and working towards it, am I happy along the way? And it reminds me of my experience that I've shared about here before, but when I had the opportunity to open the Brunswick studio, which was the second studio that we opened, well, the third studio actually. So we'd opened in Thornbury and then relocated to Preston. That experience, I know I've shared about this before, that experience was really, really full on and really exhausted me, and I pretty much burnt out as a result of that. And then when another studio came up, an opportunity to open another one, I was really mindful of I don't want to burn myself out in the process of doing this. It was like the goal itself and the dream itself of having another studio and sharing the beauty that is Eve with more people in the community was really, really inspiring and exciting to me. But I didn't want to ruin myself in the process. And so for me, I actually set as one of my key goals around creating this new studio was my own well-being. And I was very, very clear with myself up front that just opening the new studio itself was not a good enough goal. It had to include me there on opening day or opening night, feeling well and having felt well the whole way through. I mean, of course, I might have got a cold or might have had some ups and downs along the way, but by and large, I wanted to prioritize my well-being throughout the process, not just I will wreck myself in the process of getting there and then deal with the fallout later. No. So I think it's almost how do we take that approach to our goals? What do we need to have built in to ensure that the process and the present moment experience of having those goals is a relatively positive one for us? So I'm going to suggest a few different things, or 4 different things that you could do to just check your goals. If you have goals right now, whether they're business goals or personal goals, then let's ask a few questions of them and see how they stack up. So first of all, is your goal enhancing your life? Or at least, is it balanced within your life? So like what Gopal was referencing, that the other aspects of life that matter to you, are they present in your life alongside this goal? Can you still spend time with people that you love? Are you still having time for yourself or to do the things that are valuable to you as you work towards your goal? And does the goal itself enhance your life? Do you feel good having this goal in your life? So that's the first question. The next one is, do you experience flow in relation to your goal or goals? So flow is this state that I'm sure that you've heard of, but where we are challenged but not overwhelmed. And when we're right in the process of working in a state of flow, it's a state of being fully present, really, really here, really absorbed, really engaged. And it's almost like that sense of just time kind of can stop and we're just fully there. So does your goal enable you to have a sense of flow, either moments like that when you're literally doing work on it, where it's just so absorbing, so engaging, and you're just fully present in the moment. But even just overall, even if it's not a full kind of flow state like that, But is it just that sweet spot of challenging and inspiring in that way and engaging for you? Maybe it's like a sense of like where something is like just out of reach. So you've got to stretch to get to it, but it's not so far out of reach that it's completely overwhelming and you feel a sense that you'll never be able to do it. Now, is it motivating for you in that sense? Do you have that sense of feeling really alive as you work towards your goal? Okay, next one. Are you getting the benefit of experiencing a sense of progress on your goals, that you're making progress? So, there are studies that show that when we feel like we are progressing towards our goals or achieving our goals or steps in the direction of our goals, that we experience more positive emotions. And on the flip side, if we feel like our goals are out of reach or like we're not actually making any progress towards them, then we experience more negative emotions. And those emotions, whether positive or negative, can ripple out into other areas of our lives, of course. So are you getting the benefit of those positive emotions that come from feeling like you're actually making progress towards your goal? It reminds me of that thing that I know I do, and maybe you do, where you have a to-do list. And if you do something that's not on the to-do list, that after you've done the thing, you go and write it on your to-do list just to tick it off, to say, I've done it. And I think that's just because we want to have that sense of progressing towards our goals, of getting things done, of achieving things, so that we get those positive feelings that come along with that. So are you getting those positive feelings of making progress in your goals? And the last question for you to consider is, does your goal feel meaningful for you? And this is another one that really makes a difference to our ongoing experience of the goal. If the goal doesn't feel like it's meaningful for you, in that it matters to you and you feel personally connected with it, then it's going to be much harder for you to work on. It's going to be much harder to make progress or to feel a sense of satisfaction in making progress. So if your goal is just kind of like some arbitrary big number of an amount that you want to have in your bank account, for example, you may not feel like really fully connected with that. It may not feel like a meaningful goal for you. It might. And so no judgment if that feels like it is meaningful for you, then great. But ask that of yourself as you consider your dreams, your goals. Is it meaningful for you? So if you have answered no to any of those 4 questions, then you may want to consider revising your goal. It's funny. Sometimes you might go through quite a process of how to set your goals, and maybe you do like the SMART goal, the specific, measurable, blah, 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 all of those things. But quite often we'll just set our goal and then we just measure ourselves against our ability to achieve that goal. And it's like, am I living up to it? Am I doing okay? And maybe we forget that actually it might not be us. It might be the goal. The goal that's the problem. It's not me. It's you. It's the goal. So it can be worth actually considering maybe changing your dream, changing your goal. You're allowed to do that. And so perhaps it's about downsizing the goal. And I know that that feels weird, or has the potential to feel weird in a culture that is all about big, hairy, audacious goals. And if your dream isn't big enough, or if it doesn't scare you, then it's not big enough. But I guess just let me be the one to say, you don't have to listen to that. If it's not serving you, you might want to actually make your goal smaller. That would be okay. Or you might just want to make some tweaks to it. Or you might want to break it down into smaller sections and focus on one section or like one part of your goal for now rather than the whole thing. And then when you feel like you're at the point that you can or that you've achieved that smaller goal, then you can look at the bigger one again, or perhaps the next step towards the bigger one. Because ultimately, wouldn't it be great to have a goal that is not just something that you're excited about for the future and that, oh, when I get there, everything's going to be amazing? Because we know, as I shared before, like that's not necessarily going to be your enduring experience of achieving a goal. It's that whole thing of like, you get there and realize there is no there. So wouldn't it be great to actually be enjoying and experiencing benefits from having the goal even as you work towards it, not just when you get there? Wouldn't it be great to be able to say positively yes to these statements that yes, my goal is enhancing my life and fitting into the bigger picture of my life, and I am able to do all the other things that matter to me even as I hold this goal and work towards it? And to say, yes, I do experience a sense of flow when working on my goal. I do feel present and engaged and challenged just enough. And to say, yep, I do enjoy the good feelings that come from feeling like I'm making progress on my goal. And yes, my goal is meaningful to me. And so each step that I take towards it, I feel good because it's something that I genuinely care about. It's something I'm excited about or passionate about or driven for on a personal level. It means something to me. So that's it for today. I wish you the best as you apply this and maybe revisit some of your goals, whether they are explicit goals that you have written down or whether they're things that you have just that are there in your mind that you hold yourself to. Maybe it's worth re-examining some of those and making some tweaks where that would serve you. And of course, I would love to hear about how you go with that. So please feel free to get in touch with me. You can do it through my website, anniecarter.com.au, or on Instagram @_Annie Carter. I really do love hearing from you and hearing even your questions or things that come up for you as you consider what I've shared in this episode or any other episodes. I also do just want to say once again, I'm super grateful for you sharing this podcast with other people. And if you're able to do that in your way, I would be, really, really thankful for that. So it might be that you put it on your social media or that you let a friend know about this. I also would love if you could take the time to write a review in whichever platform that you listen to your podcast. It all helps. And I really appreciate you being part of spreading the word about this podcast. All right, I will leave you to it. I hope you have a beautiful day and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.